In the desert, nothing is taken quickly. Not trust, not land, not water. But once something's gone, it takes generations to bring it back. My name is Nathan Beckett. I left this land chasing progress. When I came home, I found progress had followed me. Not with kindness, but with contracts, forged maps, and dry pipelines. They told me the future didn't belong to men like me. That tradition was inefficient. That soil had no memory. But they forgot something. The land remembers. And so do I. This isn't just about a farm or water. This is about who gets to decide what survives and who gets erased while the ink is still drying. The sun rose hard over Sierra Junction, Arizona. No pastel glow, no gentle warmth, just heat and light, sharp as a blade. The land didn't ease into the day. It baked alive in it. Nathan Beckett stood on the porch of his family's old ranch house, sipping black coffee from a chipped mug that still had his dad's faded initials on the side. His boots were dusty. His shirt was already sticking to his back. The air smelled like mesquite, rust, and the dry hush of soil that hadn't seen real rain in months. 3 days. That's how long he'd been back. He'd left Sierra Junction 15 years ago with a degree in hydrology, a job offer from the Bureau of Reclamation, and a head full of purpose. Somewhere along the way, he ended up buried in data models, bureaucratic meetings, and a half-finished waterway project that died when federal funding got rerouted to military tech. Now, at 39, he was back where it all began, on the 800 acres of red dirt and cracked irrigation pipes, trying to pick up the pieces of what his parents had left behind after a car crash on Highway 67. But this morning, something felt off. It wasn't the heat. He knew that kind of heat like a second skin. It was the envelope taped to the front gate. White, clean, official-looking. The type of envelope that didn't belong out here, unless someone wanted to make a point. He tore it open. Notice of violation, Sierra Heritage. Homeowners Association. His eyes narrowed. You are hereby ordered to cease all industrial activity within 500 feet of Sierra Heritage Subdivision in accordance with Municipal Code 4.3.7 and Community Peace Guidelines. He stopped reading. What industrial activity? He was running 2 water tests and leveling an old corral. The HOA had only been formed a few months ago when a housing development popped up on the northern ridge cookie-cutter homes with solar panels, dry riverbeds lined with white rocks, and plastic mailboxes in neat rows. They called it eco-luxury desert living. He called it trespassing with style. Nathan crumpled the notice and shoved it in his back pocket. He'd call whoever was in charge and straighten it out. Maybe they'd sent it to the wrong address. By noon, he was at the Sierra Heritage Community Center, which looked more like a glorified mailbox hut with an air-conditioned meeting room tacked on. Inside, a woman stood behind the reception desk, too polished for this heat. Her name tag read Marcy. Name? She asked without looking up. Nathan Beckett. She clicked something on her computer. Oh, you're the farmer. Technically, I'm a hydrologist. Temporarily, also the farmer. You got our notice. Yeah. I think there's been a mistake. That land's been Beckett family property since 1912. She gave a tight smile. The HOA doesn't dispute that. But according to our records, a section of your property overlaps our community buffer zone. That land was annexed for planning purposes and is now under review. Annexed. His voice tightened. By whom? You'd have to speak to our director, Ms. Helena Ward. Marcy gestured to the glass doors at the back of the building. She's expecting you. Helena Ward stood at the head of a long table surrounded by neatly organized files, real estate plans, and what looked suspiciously like a county development blueprint. She was in her mid-40s, tall, elegant, and built like someone who'd argued in front of generals. Her eyes were cool and calculating. Nathan Beckett, she said smoothly, not offering a handshake. Welcome back to Sierra Junction. Let's get to it, Nathan said. You sent me a violation notice. We did, as part of our environmental compliance initiative. My family's been here for 4 generations, You moved in 8 months ago. Helena didn't blink. And yet your zoning status lapsed 2 years ago. Without active agricultural certification, your land reverts to standard county jurisdiction, subject to HOA review. That's not how water rights work. She smiled faintly. We're not talking about water. Not yet. Nathan stiffened. He knew that tone. The subtext wasn't compliance. It was takeover. Helena continued. Sierra Heritage is a pilot community. Smart zoning, shared infrastructure, sustainable growth. The state is watching. And we can't afford noise, dust, or misallocated acreage. Misallocated. You're sitting on untapped resources, Mr. Beckett. You could be part of something cleaner, smarter, more profitable, he interrupted. Her expression flickered. Nathan stepped closer. I've read about your work, former JAG officer. Then legal counsel for Western Infrastructure Alliance. You specialize in land use code reinterpretation. She tilted her head. And you specialize in obsolete irrigation systems. We both have our strengths. Nathan leaned in, voice low. That land's mine, my father's, my grandfather's. You don't scare me. You should be scared of being irrelevant. He walked out without another word. By the time he got back to the ranch, there were new surveyor flags staked across his north field, bright orange plastic whipping in the desert wind. They weren't even trying to hide it anymore. Nathan knelt beside one, pulling it out of the ground. He felt it in his chest, not anger, not yet, but something deeper, something older. The desert wasn't dry because it lacked water. It was dry because people had always tried to own what should never have been theirs. And now, someone had come to take his. Nathan didn't sleep that night. He sat on the porch with a lantern and a stack of dusty county maps his dad had kept stored in the old shed. Sierra Junction had always been a quiet town, full of stubborn ranchers, slow talkers, and land that never gave anything for free. But now it was different. Now it was organized. He traced the northern property line with a calloused finger. The new Development Sierra Heritage cut, close to his grandfather's original survey markers. Too close. And according to Helena, some of that land was no longer his. He pulled out his deed. Then, the county zoning records he printed years ago just in case. Side by side, they didn't match. There was a sliver of land about 40 acres missing from the current zoning overlay. He blinked, then looked again. Someone had redrawn the boundaries. Not officially. Not with court filings or eminent domain. But through what looked like a buffer zone adjustment. Tucked into a minor zoning code change passed 6 months ago. Nothing flashy. Just enough legal noise to slip past notice. Nathan swore under his breath. The next day, he drove into town. His first stop, the county recorder's office. It was a squat, beige building with humming fluorescent lights and cabinets full of secrets nobody bothered to question. The clerk, at the front. Joan Wexler, early 60s, wore bright purple glasses and a sweatshirt that said "Land is Memory." "Back so soon, Beckett?" she asked. "Didn't expect you to come digging through records this fast. You've heard?" She shrugged. "I hear a lot. Especially when HOAs suddenly start showing up with real estate lawyers and environmental planners asking for microzoning variance forms." Nathan leaned on the counter. "I need everything on file from the last 12 months about parcel 17A north edge of my family's property." Joan raised an eyebrow. "You think they moved the line?" "I think they buried the line." She sighed, then motioned him behind the desk. Together, they scanned document after document. And just like he feared, it was there. A buffer adjustment request filed by Sierra Heritage, HOA. Signed off not by a judge or council, but by an infrastructure oversight board Nathan had never heard of. "Who are these people?" he asked. Joan clicked around. "It's a sub-agency, formed under Prop 92. They're supposed to streamline community development. Mostly paperwork jockeys." Nathan shook his head. "No one voted for them." "Didn't have to," she said. "They were formed by executive appointment during the drought emergency order. A loophole in a crisis. How convenient." Then came the worst part. He found a deed transfer application, filed under something called the Sierra Community Stewardship Trust, showing the north 600 acres of his ranch as under consideration for sustainable conversion. The application was stamped and dated, but not signed by him. Someone else had signed it, digitally, in his name. Nathan's stomach twisted. "Can you print this?" he asked. Joan nodded, lips thin. "But be careful, Nathan. They don't do this to just anyone. They pick people who can't fight back." He looked at her. Then they picked wrong. Back at the ranch, Nathan stared at the forged document on his kitchen table. His dad always said paper was cheap, but it could be deadly if signed wrong. He picked up his phone and scrolled through his contacts. Most were dead numbers or old colleagues. But there was one name he hadn't tapped in years: Jules Ortega. Last time they spoke, Jules had just been fired from the Tribune after writing an expose about a water privatization deal that linked a major governor to an offshore holding company. She picked up on the second ring. "Nathan Beckett," she said. "I figured I'd hear from you again eventually. You only call when something's burning." "It's burning," he said. "Land or water?" "Both." That night, Jules arrived in a rusted-out Prius, hair in a bun, boots dusty from wherever she'd come from last. She didn't ask questions, just sat, took the papers, and read. 30 minutes later, she looked up. "They're not just stealing your land," she said. "They're rerouting your water." Nathan's jaw tightened. "Say that again?" Jules pulled out her laptop and opened an interactive water flow map she'd built for an old investigation. She plugged in the latest data she scraped from Sierra Junction's planning board. The pipeline that used to flow from Beckett Well No. 2 through the town, then toward the new development, had been digitally rerouted. The GIS coordinates now listed the source as publicly shared reservoir infrastructure. His reservoir. His water. Nathan stood up and walked out into the dark. The sky stretched above him, black, endless, uncaring. The desert didn't just grow crops. It grew silence, secrets. And now, someone thought they could bury the truth in it. But Nathan had spent his life studying flow, and he knew something Helena Ward didn't. The pressure always builds. And when it does, something breaks. 3 days after Jules arrived, the real storm rolled in, not from the sky, but from a line of black SUVs that pulled up to the edge of Nathan's ranch. Nathan watched through binoculars from his rooftop. 5 men stepped out in dress shirts and dustless boots. One of them had a clipboard. Another had a drone. They looked too clean to belong here, like bankers on a safari. "Surveyors?" Jules asked, joining him on the roof. "Developers," Nathan replied. They don't send suits just to take soil samples." He recognized the logo stitched on their vests. Aqua Fortis Corp., the same company that used to fund water conservation projects across the Southwest, until they quietly rebranded as an infrastructure efficiency group and started buying up dormant aquifers. And now they were here. Jules took a photo. Time to find out how deep this thing goes. That afternoon, they drove 3 towns over to meet someone Nathan hoped would still talk to him. Darnell Chang had been a cybersecurity analyst working for a utilities firm that went bankrupt after a ransomware breach. He was brilliant, paranoid, and owed Nathan a favor from a long-ago desert pipeline audit, where Darnell's code saved an entire district from being overbilled millions. They found him in a shipping container turned hacker den behind a closed-down auto parts store. It smelled like solder, coffee, and revenge. "Beckett," Darnell said, not looking up from his monitors. "I figured you'd show up eventually." Jules raised an eyebrow. "You're not hard to find?" Darnell snorted. "Please, I let you find me." Nathan didn't waste time. "I need you to look into Aqua Fortis, specifically Sierra Junction. Find out who's pulling strings." Darnell leaned back. "You brought data?" Jules handed over a USB. Everything we've got so far, and a few leaked zoning files. Darnell scanned the drive, then frowned. Oh, this is bad. What kind of bad? Nathan asked. The kind of bad where your property isn't just being rezoned, it's being digitized into a smart grid system, a ghost overlay. They're mapping your land as a pilot governance sector under a shell company, Red Mesa Holdings. Nathan blinked. A what? It means, Darnell said, typing furiously, they're treating your land like it's a test bed. They'll install water flow sensors, AI-based usage monitoring, and remote override valves, all routed through a proprietary platform they call, wait for it, Clearstream AI. Jules leaned in. That name's popped up in some of my old reports. It was used in a water control project in Nevada. The community lost 40% of their agricultural access without a single vote. Darnell nodded grimly. Same tech, just with prettier branding and stronger NDAs. Nathan's jaw locked. And who owns Red Mesa Holdings? Darnell smiled darkly. Now that's where it gets interesting. The screen flickered as a web of corporate entities lit up, shell after shell, address after address, until finally a name surfaced. Helena Ward, filed as Director of Strategic Implementation under Red Mesa, Aquafortis, and a third entity called NACREI, the National Alliance for Community Resource Integration, a DC-based PAC specializing in modern municipal partnerships. Nathan stared. She's not just running the HOA. She's running the whole acquisition model, Darnell said. Your HOA is just the entry point. Jules was already typing. This goes federal, maybe international. Nathan sat in silence. The desert felt further away now, smaller, like the problem wasn't his ranch anymore. It was everything beyond it. What's their endgame? He asked. Darnell didn't hesitate. Control the water, control the land. Then lease both back to the people who already live there. Permanently dependent, legally justified. And the community? They'll never know. It'll look like infrastructure improvements, green policies, drought planning. Until one day they open the faucet and find out it's metered by a foreign entity. That night, Nathan walked alone to the edge of the old reservoir. The water shimmered under moonlight quiet, still, older than any law. He crouched and touched the surface. This was his father's water, his grandfather's, his great-grandfather's. It had fed this land long before HOA boardrooms and digital deeds. He looked up at the stars. This wasn't about land anymore. This was about ownership, of food, of water, of choice. And if they thought he'd just let it slip away quietly, they'd miscalculated. Back at the house, Jules and Darnell were laying out blueprints, maps, and access points. This is where we flip it, Jules said. We expose it all. Nathan nodded. But not just expose. But he pointed at the spot on the map marked Junction Valve 7B, the master regulator that fed water not just to the ranch, but to the town and the entire Sierra Heritage development. I'm taking back control. The desert was quiet that morning. Too quiet. Nathan stood beside Junction Valve 7B, the old control point his father once called the heart of the land. It was buried under a rusted utility shed near the cottonwood trees, its control mechanism mechanical, analog blissfully, untouched by remote override systems or wireless protocols. It had been years since anyone touched it, but Nathan still remembered the sequence left, half-turn, push, wait, a ritual, passed down like scripture. He brushed dust from the housing and opened the lock with his father's key. Beneath the steel lid was a pressure dial, still functional, still beautiful. He turned the valve. The flow reversed. The water, which had been diverted north to Sierra Heritage's recycled irrigation grid, now redirected south and east back into the original canal system, toward the older ranches and wild plots that still depended on gravity-fed lines and basin irrigation. Within 3 hours, water slowed to a trickle in the HOA zones. By dusk, faucets ran dry. The first call came from Jules. You've made the news, she said. Nathan grunted. Already? Oh yeah. Mysterious outage strikes smart development. You're the local villain and the underground hero, depending on who you ask. And Helena? She's furious. Called an emergency HOA board meeting. But the best part? One of her tech contractors leaked an email to me. Helena just requested Aquafortis to deploy a mobile water unit from Flagstaff. So she's panicking. She's cornered. But she doesn't know how small this town really is. That contractor, her cousin's ex, they don't like her much. Nathan allowed himself a dry smile. Good. By the next morning, Sierra Heritage was in chaos. Residents stood outside with buckets. HOA members were yelling at local officials. The press had arrived, circling with cameras, and questions no one wanted to answer. And Nathan? Nathan was already 2 steps ahead. He, Jules, and Darnell sat at a borrowed table inside the old fire station, now converted into an impromptu operations center. A map of Sierra Junction was spread out across the table. Red pushpins marked compromised wells. Green pins marked community-controlled lines. We've flipped control over 40% of the grid, Darnell said, using manual valves, underground reroutes, and code delays. They can't even access Clearstream without our interference script. We're in. Jules looked up from her laptop. And the files? All scheduled for drop. She tapped her screen. I've coordinated with 2 environmental watchdogs and 1 syndicate reporter. At 8 a.m. tomorrow, we go live. Everything gets published. Nathan stared at the map. Then we finish this. That afternoon, a black Escalade drove up his gravel road, kicking dust into the air. Nathan stepped out with a wrench still in hand, sweat on his brow, boots stained with grease and river mud. The passenger door opened. Helena Ward stepped out. Not in heels this time. Combat boots. No makeup. Sleeves rolled up. Nathan watched her walk, wondering if she thought that made her seem more grounded, more human. I thought you might come, he said. Helena smiled tightly. You're a hard man to ignore. You've been ignoring people like me your whole career. She didn't flinch. You've made your point. The development's running dry. Residents are calling the governor. You've created a crisis. I didn't create anything, Nathan said. I just reversed the theft. She folded her arms. That land could have been something better, efficient, safe, modern. Instead, you've chosen chaos. No, he said evenly. I chose history. I chose people who actually live here. And I chose not to let you pave over everything that doesn't fit your brochure. Helena stepped closer. You think this is over? You shut one valve. We'll build another. You exposed a deal, so what? The system survives. It always does. Nathan leaned in. Then maybe it's time someone breaks it for good. She left without another word. An hour later, the sheriff's department showed up, not to arrest Nathan, but to ask for a copy of the zoning maps. Turns out, someone from inside the county commission had also started asking questions. It was spreading. The lie was cracking. That evening, as the sun bled across the desert and the irrigation canals gurgled back to life, Nathan stood alone in the orchard his mother once planted. Rows of withered trees now swayed with the promise of water. Jules walked up beside him. She's going to fight back, she said. I know. She'll use the courts, politics, maybe even the feds. Nathan nodded. Then we hit first. Later that night, under the hum of fluorescent lights, the file dump went live. Every manipulated zoning document, every secret agreement, the Aquafortis acquisition maps, the Clearstream architecture, Helena's emails with DC, lobbyists, the real ownership of Red Mesa Holdings, and a short video. Nathan's face, no filter, no edits, explaining the history of the land, the theft, and what it meant to fight back. It went viral. By dawn, the entire Southwest was watching, and the war for water had officially begun. By noon the next day, The fire had spread beyond Sierra Junction. News stations across Arizona and New Mexico were broadcasting Nathan's story. Hashtags like #waterback, #dryline leaks, and #red mesa. Exposed trended on every platform. Environmental watchdogs, tribal leaders, farmers' unions, they were all talking. What started as one man's battle over stolen land had become a regional reckoning. But not everyone was celebrating. That afternoon, the Arizona State Water Authority issued a cease and desist letter not to Aquafortis, not to the county, but to Nathan. The letter accused him of unauthorized disruption of a community water system, violation of shared infrastructure code, endangerment of civilian welfare under emergency drought policy. Nathan read the letter in silence. The words were precise, clinical, brutal. Classic counterattack, Jules said, pacing. They're painting you as a domestic threat. Darnell leaned over the laptop. They're also hitting us digitally. My servers are being flooded with takedown requests. DMCA strikes, even copyright claims on our maps. Nathan didn't say anything. He just stared out the window. Outside, the sky was darkening. Storm clouds finally gathering over the valley after months of false hope. The irony wasn't lost on him. 2 hours later, the sheriff showed up. "Gotta bring you in, Nathan," he said, not meeting his eyes. "For what?" "State order. Technically, it's a protective custody hold pending investigation. They don't want a scene." Nathan considered resisting, but he saw the fear in the sheriff's eyes, not fear of him, but fear of something bigger, something no badge could stop. He nodded. "All right, let's go." They didn't put him in a jail cell. They locked him in a utility office in the county courthouse, no charges formally filed. No phone call, no explanation, just silence. Until Helena walked in. No blazer, just a raincoat and damp hair. She dropped a manila folder on the desk. "Everything in this town used to be invisible," she said. "Nobody paid attention to water lines, deeds, or soil reports. It was boring. Background noise." Nathan didn't respond. She opened the folder. "These are the settlement options." He raised an eyebrow. "You're offering me a deal?" "I'm offering you relief," she said. "We rescind the charges. You get 300 acres untouched, control of your well. In exchange, you walk away from the rest. We call it a legacy zone." Nathan scoffed. "A zoo for the last honest rancher?" "A compromise," Helena replied. "Before this escalates." He leaned forward. "You're not worried about escalation. You're worried the rest of the counties will copy what I did." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "They won't. You're one man. You got lucky with timing. But timing runs out." Nathan pushed the folder back toward her. "So does your water." Outside, something had shifted. The rain had started. Light at first, then heavier. Real rain. For the first time in months, the earth drank without debt. The people drank too. Because while Nathan had been locked up, Jules and Darnell weren't idle. They'd activated the Red Drop Protocol, an automated file release system timed with the story hitting national news. It wasn't just local documents anymore. It was emails from state officials showing knowledge of illegal annexations. It was leaked transcripts between Helena and lobbyists discussing community displacement metrics. So it was signed wire transfers from Red Mesa Holdings to county accounts in exchange for zoning variances. Proof, undeniable, ugly. By the following morning, protesters had gathered outside the courthouse. Farmers, veterans, tribal water rights activists, journalists. Signs read, "Water is not a luxury. Red Mesa, Edel red flags. Free Beckett." Inside, the governor's office called the sheriff directly. They released Nathan without explanation or apology. As he stepped outside, the rain still falling, the crowd erupted in cheers. He didn't speak. He just lifted the old valve key his father gave him, rusted and soaked, above his head. A symbol. A promise. But in the corner of the crowd, Helena watched from beneath an umbrella. She wasn't done. She made a call as she slipped away into her SUV, whispering just 3 words: "Go federal now." Back at the ranch, Nathan sat in the barn with Jules and Darnell. The storm had passed, but the wind still whispered against the wood like a warning. "They're coming hard next," Jules said. "Feds, lobbyists, lawsuits. Maybe worse." "I know." Darnell looked up. "So what's the plan?" Nathan looked at the land outside, muddy, alive, stubborn as ever. "Simple," he said. "We hold." The morning after Nathan's release, Sierra Junction smelled like renewal. Petrichor clung to the earth. The canal water shimmered. And for the first time in what felt like years, there was no drone of backhoes, no glint of surveyor vests, just mud, birdsong, and community. Nathan stood at the edge of his field, boots deep in soaked dirt, watching people gather. Not just ranchers, but school teachers, mechanics, young couples from the edge of town, even a few Sierra Heritage residents carrying homemade signs that read, "This water belongs to all of us." A week ago, they wouldn't have made eye contact. Now they were planting seedlings together, where trenches had once been dug for luxury sewer lines. "Is this real?" Jules asked, stepping up beside him. "It's happening," Nathan replied. "But real? That's going to take work." They'd spent the past 48 hours coordinating emergency hearings with the state board, pushing for the dissolution of Sierra Heritage HOA's land authority and filing injunctions against Aquafortis. Red Mesa Holdings, in response, had gone radio silent. Helena had vanished. But the silence wasn't peace. It was preparation. That evening, as dusk painted the valley in soft orange, a delivery van with no markings pulled into the ranch. Nathan stepped onto the porch warily, hand close to the old revolver under his jacket. The driver, a middle-aged woman in a black coat, handed him a single envelope. No return address. Just a government seal stamped in red. U.S. Department of the Interior, Office of Strategic Resource Oversight. Inside was a 6-page document. Nathan read every line slowly. It confirmed what he feared. Helena Ward was no longer just acting as a private citizen. Red Mesa Holdings had petitioned for federal recognition under national drought protection legislation, claiming Nathan's wellhead and land were now a federalized resource hub. And most damning of all, the petition included a clause for eminent domain acquisition under emergency security powers. They were trying to take the land permanently through Washington. Back in the barn, Jules slammed her hand on the table. "This is war," she hissed. Darnell nodded grimly. "They're leveraging climate emergency laws to backdoor land control. If this goes through, it sets a national precedent. They can take any farm, any well." Nathan didn't move, just stared at the paper. "How long do we have?" he asked. 4 days until the petition clears subcommittee," Jules replied. "Maybe less. Then we've got 4 days to burn their plan to the ground." They moved fast. Jules coordinated a press conference in Phoenix. Nathan stood on the steps of the state capitol and held up the letter for every camera in sight. "This," he said, voice steady, "is not conservation. It's colonization in a clean suit. You want to help farmers? Ask us what we need. You want to fight drought? Partner with us. But don't steal from us and call it progress." The video went viral. Even national outlets picked it up. Farmers in Kansas, Oregon, and Colorado started coming forward with similar experiences. A bigger pattern was emerging. Meanwhile, Darnell found the real prize: internal emails from a Department of the Interior contractor confirming they'd planned to use Sierra Junction as a proof-of-concept zone for rural water monetization. Even worse, Arizona wasn't the only test site. That night, Nathan met with the state water commissioner. She was sharp, quiet, and wore exhaustion like armor. "You know," she said, pouring herself coffee, "they told me what you were doing was reckless, that you were destabilizing a system we barely hold together." Nathan looked her dead in the eye. A broken system doesn't deserve balance. It deserves rebuilding. She nodded slowly. Then let me show you something. She opened a locked drawer and handed him a redacted report. Title: Zone 9A Expansion Proposal, Northern Nevada. At the bottom, in bold, Primary Acquisition, Target, Beckett Family Holdings, Backup, Crow Ridge Agricultural District. It wasn't over. It was just the beginning. The next morning, Nathan walked his land alone. He stopped beside the old windmill and looked out over the soil now pulsing with life. Not because of him, because of everyone who had stood up, planted their boots, and said, "Not this time." In the distance, a boy chased a dog across a shallow irrigation channel. Two elders from the tribal council stood beside a young architect sketching a shared reservoir expansion plan. They weren't waiting anymore. They were building something. Together. Jules stepped out from the barn with a stack of papers. "Supreme Court's reviewing the petition," she said. "It's on hold." Nathan exhaled. Not a victory, but a delay and a window. He glanced at the files in her hand. "What are those?" She smiled. "Other towns, other farmers, people asking what to do next." Nathan took the files. His hands were calloused, dirty, worn but steady. In a courtroom in D.C., a Helena Ward sits alone, watching her empire unravel. In Sierra Junction, children plant trees on the site of the former HOA office. In a trailer on the Nevada border, a farmer opens an envelope marked "The Dry Line" with a USB drive inside. Nathan stands beneath a new sign outside his ranch, Community Water Cooperative, Beckett Basin Division, and beneath it a smaller plaque. This land didn't dry, it just waited.